Welcome to the podcast. I would love it if you could just take it away and share a little bit about yourself, your history, where you came from, all the things for some of our listeners out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lauren, for having me. Excited to spend some time with you today. But to your point, my background, where I'm from. So I actually grew up in a town called Loudonville, Ohio, which is not far. It's about 30 minutes from where Certified Angus Beef is actually headquartered in Worcester, Ohio. So kind of north central in our state. And my family farms. So I have production agriculture background. We grain farm, and then we also raise beef cattle. My mom was a 4-H agent through Ohio State University. So grew up Cloverbud all the way through to 4-H. So just grew up in a truly ag family. And I would say growing up, that's what we were centered on, was going out to the barn together, doing chores together. So great way to grow up. Always thought and knew that I wanted to be involved in agriculture in some way, shape, or form. I would say I was probably like most kids, that growing up, you think that is going to be through the form of being a veterinarian. So I grew up always thinking, hey, vet school is going to be, my end game. That's where I want to be, a large animal vet. And as I started to work through undergrad and just had some internships, actually with Dr. Fluharty that was working out of Ohio State in ruminant nutrition, it was kind of like the light bulb went on, and thank goodness he poured into me and said, are you sure vet school is exactly what you want? And just exposed me to the world of research and let me do some undergraduate research. And I got to present that at meetings like the Midwest Animal Science conferences, and just really fell in love with that piece that I didn't even really realize was out there, I guess. So started just doing some undergrad research and like I said, really liked it. So actually changed my career track and went and started my master's at Ohio State in ruminant nutrition, and really focused my master's more actually on the welfare side of things. So weaning beef calves, how do we make that as low stress as we possibly can? So looking at different alternative weaning methods that we can use and how those impact calf behavior and growth parameters and performance. And then ended up still loving the research scene. So I actually stayed on for my PhD right after that, continued on and finished really kind of shifting gears a little bit and having more of that, I would say, honestly, even environmental perspective. So here in Ohio, we deal with very changing environments, very dramatically different conditions with our spring calving herds. So we are getting warmer and wetter throughout our winters. And so we just don't know, how does that impact a gestating female, whether it's a mature cow, whether it's a first calf heifer. So my research then was really focused on what are nutrient requirements of those gestating females in this different type of environment. So really there had been no work done in females. There'd been some done in feedlot cattle, but nothing in gestating females. And how, if we aren't meeting those requirements, what's the impact on that fetus that she's growing and then on that fetus later in life. So that's kind of my career track up until I started with Certified Angus Beef. So I would have started at the brand about 3 years ago now. I actually just had my anniversary not that long ago. And I serve today and started my role here as our sustainability and animal care scientist. So it's a long job title. And we can get into that, Lauren, if you want to talk more of what that is. But essentially what I do today is I sit on our production team. So I spend majority of my time working with the cattle producers that make up our brand network. So it'd be anything from seed stock producers to commercial producers to feed yard managers and owners, and really every step in between there. And just thinking through continuous education and how do we continue to think about sustainability in a way that makes sense on the farm and the ranch. And we're helping just document some of those things that are happening and the good things that realistically have been happening for generations now. And then I would say the other part of my job that I actually really, really enjoy is actually going out with all of our brand partners, whether it be food service or retail or distribution partners, and just sharing out those phenomenal stories that we have of, we are a sustainable protein, we are a sustainable brand, and we're doing the right things. And here's how we can actually tell that story and back that up in a way that makes sense to them. So that's just kind of high level. I know that's a little bit long, but how I got to where I am today with the brand.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit more about CAB? And I'm sure many people in the industry are familiar with it, but not everyone truly understands the full aspect of what you guys do and what you provide to the industry as well. So can you just give a little bit of background on that before we start diving into some sustainability?
Yeah, sure thing. So you're spot on. With most people are familiar with the brand. They've heard of us. They may have interacted with us in some way, shape, or form. but there's still always a lot of confusion. And we always joke, it is a little bit confusing how we work and how we operate. So just to give some history, we were founded back in 1978, and a lot of people wonder, why are we headquartered in Worcester, Ohio? And that's actually where the small group of farmers that got together and said, hey, we can do better than this. The beef that's on the restaurant menu today that said Angus beef was not good. So they said, hey, look, we are Angus ranchers and farmers. We can do better than this. And that's honestly how, the child of Certified Angus Beef was born a little bit. It was just a group of grassroots guys sitting at the table saying, hey, look, let's create some sort of a branded beef program that at the end of the day is driving that consistent high quality beef to a consumer, right? And they know it's going to be high quality and consistent beef every time they get it. So the integrity system behind it was a big piece of developing the brand. But just to, again, give some background, some high level, we would be actually a subsidiary company of the American Angus Association. So they are our parent company. So at the end of the day, to your point, we do a lot of different things. We have a lot of different teams, all the way from the production team, thinking more of how do we continue to drive that quality message with producers? How do we get the right tools in the toolbox of producers to target quality cattle production, whether that be at the seed stock level or commercial level? And then all the way to our sales team, our marketing teams, our communication teams. We have, the whole team that does all of our photo and our media to make sure that we are driving value for all of our brand partners on the other end of the supply chain. Thinking, again, food service, retail, all of our distributor partners, how do we drive value for them? What resources can we provide for them that help them tell that brand story? But at the end of the day, so while we touch realistically, every single piece of our supply chain, all the way from gate to plate, what's really neat is at the end of the day, every single thing that we do helps us drive our mission, which is ultimately to increase demand for registered Angus cattle through our branded beef program. And we've got carcass specifications, and there's a lot of things that it takes to actually become certified Angus beef, and that doesn't happen until it's at the packing plant. There's a lot of confusion, I feel like, around that too in our industry of what actually is certified Angus beef and how does it become certified Angus beef. So we can get into that too if you have more questions on that. But essentially, everything we do is ultimately to drive demand for registered Angus genetics and drive that value all the way from the consumer who's willing to pay more for that phenomenal eating experience back to the seed stock producer.
Would love to dive into what makes certified Angus beef. Like what does that mean, especially in the packing plant?
Yeah, so we've got 10 carcass-based specifications that a carcass has to meet. So a lot of people get confused on, is that a certified Angus beef ranch or a certified Angus beef feed yard? And we actually don't own any cattle. We don't own any feed yards. We don't own any packing plants. The only thing that we own as a brand is our logo, is that trademark. So essentially how our brand network works is we have to license partners, whether it's a packer or further processor or a food service distributor, a restaurant, or retailer. They have to have a licensing agreement with us to be able to, one, produce certified Angus beef. So thinking more, Lauren, to your point of how does it actually become CAB, the packing plant has to be licensed with us and have an agreement to actually be able to produce it. So when we think about that, say a feed yard or a farmer would send a load of cattle to a packing plant, if they're licensed with us, they have to first pass our hide specifications. So it would be predominantly black hided, meaning no white behind the shoulder or above the flank. Once those cattle are stamped Angus eligible, or we call them, A-type cattle, or essentially they get designated to the packing plant as this is eligible to be graded for certified Angus beef. Then it would go through the production line just as any other carcass would. And once it actually gets to a grading stand, and that's the piece today that we require, is it's got to be someone there from USDA calling that grade. They know our 10 carcass specifications, everything from the marbling score it has to meet all the way to the back fat thickness, the ribeye area, all of those things that play into producing that high quality but also consistent carcass. Once it meets that hide specification, it then has to meet all 10 of our carcass specs. And if it does, then it will be stamped. That carcass will be stamped as certified Angus beef. And then that packing plant can then sell whatever off of that carcass as certified Angus beef.
Absolutely. And I feel like that ties directly into kind of your role at CAB very closely in sustainability, because in order to have a super high quality cut of meat at the end of the day, you need a sustainable ranching operation and you need sustainable cattle. And sustainable cattle are actually, in my mind, I always tell people, sustainable cattle are just high quality cattle. Like if you're raising a high quality animal, they're just naturally going to be very sustainable for your ranching operation, for the environment, everything like that. I would love to dive a little bit more into your role in sustainability, what you guys are kind of seeing right now, and just maybe some high level thoughts on your guys' definition of sustainability. And then we can get into some of the nitty gritty details of what we're seeing in the industry today.
Yeah, great questions. I'd say the biggest thing that we're seeing is the fact that sustainability, we're going on a good 10 years now of this being kind of a buzzword in our industry. And I would argue today it's no longer a buzzword, right? It is truly inherent in what our consumer is asking for. And you are spot on with, we say this a lot with our brand partners, of high quality cattle care, high quality care of our land, of our resources, of our people at the farm and the ranch level inherently is a sustainable product, right? But again, for us, it's how do we communicate that in a way that makes sense and resonates with our consumers and where their questions are at today. And I would say the biggest shift that I've seen in sustainability is, at first it was kind of this means something different to everybody. It still does to a degree today, but I would argue that we're seeing our consumer research, we follow a lot of different outlets of consumer research to make sure that we're staying in tune with what our consumer is asking for. And I think what we're seeing is, while yes, taste and price and quality, all of those are still top of mind for a consumer, right? Taste is still king. Taste is still what's bringing a consumer to the table and bringing them back to beef and why beef is king. But what we're seeing today is attributes like animal welfare or questions about how that animal was raised or the environmental impact that product has starting to creep into the top 10 attributes. And even humane animal care is actually creeping into the top 5. So we're seeing just consumers, I think, start to hone in on what that means to them. But the more we get into the sustainability discussion, I think consumers are starting to realize and showing us that for them, at the end of the day, they just want to feel good about the product that they're choosing, whether it's at a food service establishment, whether it's at the retail case. They want to feel good about the product that they are taking home or serving to their friends, their family, you name it. And I think the neatest thing for us is that we're seeing a lot of consumer research hone in and say, hey, look, our greatest opportunity and our consumers' greatest question, first and foremost, is about animal welfare. So I think that just helps us as an industry then say, okay, and us as a brand specifically say, okay, that at least gives us a starting spot, right? That gives us kind of at least a guiding star of where we can start this conversation and where we really have a lot of opportunity to grow consumer trust in what we do. So when we think about animal welfare, to your point, Lauren, we're doing these things, right? We're producing high quality carcasses, we're producing high quality cattle. That inherently has a positive animal welfare story behind it. So now how do we actually document that and share that out to a consumer, to a brand partner is where we're at.
How are you guys helping producers share that story and just really start to advocate for that side of the industry of, okay, so we're doing a great job, but now people need to see that we're doing a great job. And so how are we sharing that with the consumers and really communicating that?
Yeah, so I guess I'll hone in. We're really doing this, I should say, in 3 key areas, being cattle care, the environment, and people. So when we talk about sustainability as a brand, those are kind of our 3 key areas and 3 buckets that we are trying to create initiatives, create programs that, again, to your point, address what consumers have questions and concerns about, but at the same time, provide opportunity for the farmer and the rancher, right? Because the last thing we want to do is dictate how you should raise your cattle or how you should run your operation. But again, we've got to start thinking about how do we document some things in ways that do make sense on both sides of our business, right? So I'll start first with cattle care, just again, because it's where consumers' minds are at. We've invested a lot of coming alongside of the Beef Quality Assurance Program. You know, when we sat back when I started and said, okay, we've got to start tackling this thing. We've got to start communicating more than just telling a good story, but how do we actually, to your point, document it and show it and gain that consumer confidence and trust, not just us telling you that we're doing the right things, but hey, here's some steps that we're doing to actually show that we're doing the right things. And for us, when we sat back and said, okay, beef quality assurance has been around for decades. It's nothing new, but you know what? That program we know works, right? We know it works from the standpoint of a couple different areas. One, just how we're producing a high quality product. I mean, no surprise to anybody. Look at how far we've come with quality beef production and just some of the defects that we were dealing with back when BQA was started, whether it was injection sites or dark cutters. Now you look at that today, and I would argue because of the beef quality assurance program and the education for producers that's provided, we don't hardly see any of those issues today, right? Not that they're completely non-existent, but they are extremely minimal today. So for us, the beef quality assurance program is great from its continuous education for the cattle producer, which is always a great thing, right? I argue that if you go to BQA training, open-minded, you will always at least take one thing away that you learned or something that might make you think a little bit different of, hey, maybe we need to change our load out a little bit, or, cattle keep getting balked up here. Maybe we need to think about this a little bit different, or how we're pressuring cattle, whatever it is. Maybe it's a herd health program or biosecurity. There's always something that you can take from BQA training. But for us, it's great continuous education for the producer, but we also know, and this is the part that we really, really love and think is a huge opportunity for us as a brand and as an industry, is when you look at consumer research coming out of the beef checkoff specific to BQA, we know that BQA actually increases consumer trust and their perceptions of what we do on the farm and the ranch. So they've got some research that I always love to quote. I think it just shows the power of this program. When we looked at consumers that had a positive perception of how cattle are raised for food before learning about BQA, only 44%, less than half of consumers in that study said they felt positive or strongly positive about what we all do in our day-to-day. After learning about beef quality assurance, that number rose to 70%. That's huge, right? Just learning that and they didn't get into any crazy details of what we're teaching and what's in that program, minus it's continuous education for the producer. It teaches best management practices. It incorporates the latest and greatest research into that training and into that program that's coming out of our academic, community and even our industry community and just industry experts. And that increased their trust. So for us, it's like, that's a double win, right? That's a win-win all the way around. We're growing demand for our product because we're increasing consumer trust. And at the same time, we're providing opportunity for farmer and rancher, that network, to just come alongside and just say, hey, yeah, we can always get better, right? I might be doing a phenomenal job today, but I can always get better in some way, shape, or form. So to me, it truly is a win-win that's bringing both ends of our supply chain together around a common issue, and we're moving forward. So I guess just kind of to touch on how we're actually doing that, we have what we call our Race with Respect campaign. So that would be a partnership, and we can talk about this because I think it's really unique and neat to see one of our brand partners, Cisco, who would be our largest brand partner, come alongside and say, hey, let's do this together, right? At the end of the day, they want the farming and ranching community to be sustainable. So they just basically said, we want to help. How can we help? And so we've been able to host that Race with Respect campaign, which has allowed us to host BQA trainings across the country, to do just some really fun things around BQA and incentivize folks for doing the right thing and taking that step and getting BQA certified. So it's just been fun seeing, I think, a real world case example of a brand partner who's interested in what we're doing and wants to support, and has just come to the table in a very supportive way. Not saying here's how you need to raise cattle, but we just want to help make sure that those family farms and ranches are sustainable for our business in the future. So that one's really neat, and just one way of how we're doing that one.
Absolutely. It is so fun to see industry partners come out. It's so fun to see industry partners come out like that and say, like, hey, we want to partner with you. It's becoming more and more common, I feel like, as we continue to go along this path of the consumer mindset around beef and beef production and what that looks like, of seeing people come out of the woodworks and be like, hey, we're going to work with you on this. And we love seeing that, because no one listening to this wants to be told how to raise their cattle, and especially people that are at large production scales that have been doing it so well for so long. along, it's hard to hear that, right? Like no one wants to sit there and be like, you're doing everything wrong. And it's nice to see partners come out and be like, hey, you guys are doing a lot of things right. Let's continue to help you along this path and continue to grow. Along with those lines, for all the producers listening to this, what are, like, if you could leave people with anything of knowledge or things that you want to see in the industry, or maybe just things that you see on the horizon, what are kind of your thoughts there?
Yeah, another great question. I would say my call to action first is, hey, just go get BQA certified, right? It has so much weight and so much power behind it with our brand partners, and just allows us again to talk about animal welfare, not just tell a great story, but say, when they push a little bit harder and say, well, how do I know that? How can you actually demonstrate that? That's a perfect way. And even if you're, at your local grocery store, your local restaurant, someone asks a question, again, that's just an easy way for you to tell your story. But again, back it up with something that really has some weight behind it. I would say the other thing is, we didn't get to talk about it yet, but our environment pillar, we've got a lot of great programs there as well. Because again, it's not that consumers aren't as concerned with the environmental impact. I think it's just secondary to the humane animal care part. But, we've got a lot of great programs there. We have a collaboration with Ducks Unlimited, and just trying to help get that financial and technical assistance, boots on the ground, whether it's incorporating cover crops, if you're a mixed operator, whether it's building more fencing, more water infrastructure, you name it, coming up with a grazing management plan. That's a phenomenal tool and a resource. We've got another great partner in the Noble Research Institute and a course that we call Land Stewardship. If you go to cabcattle.com, you can find information on that. And again, that's continuous education around just how do we become better stewards of our land? What are we doing in terms of soil health that's going to make that farm or ranch sustainable and really more resilient for the long run? So I would say, honestly, Lauren, it's just, there's a lot of tools, a lot of resources out there. It's just, don't be afraid of the word sustainability. Odds are you're doing a lot of these things already. Right? If you're still in the beef business today, you've been doing a lot of great things over the years to be resilient, to be sustainable, to produce a great product. We just need to talk about it, right? And we need to just be open. And whether it's programs and initiatives like what we're doing at the brand, be a part of something that just helps communicate and be a part of that network that isn't afraid to share some data with consumers, whether it's, yes, I am BQA certified, or yes, I went through the land stewardship course to better myself and how I manage my lands. Anything like that. And I would say, I don't even necessarily care what it is, because every region's going to be different, but just doing something and not just kind of sitting back. And I think what we've done as an industry is we are so good at just doing what we do best, which is raising cattle, taking care of our working lands, right? We don't necessarily want to be out in the limelight telling that story. But at the end of the day, we have a phenomenal story to tell, and we've been saying we need to tell our story for years, but now it's really time. We've got a consumer who, I think it's a huge plus, is more interested in what we do in the farming and ranching community than ever before. So let's take that as an opportunity to share our story, get their buy-in and get their confidence in what we do before we start to lose that consumer a little bit, or we don't step up and fill that void. So then we do still have a consumer that has questions and doesn't feel good about the product that they're buying.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And before we end, I do want to talk about your environmental side of things. I know it's maybe not as top of mind as it has been in years past, but it is still a factor that our consumers care about. So I would love to hear kind of your thoughts on your environmental side, what you guys are seeing, what's important to consumers there, and how you're partnering with cattle ranchers right now.
Yeah. I think the hard part, Lauren, is that the environment piece is so complicated. And from my perspective, I was just at the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, their General Assembly, and the hardest part is still, we know that cattle have a positive impact on the environment, right? We know that there's soil carbon sequestration happening. We know that by grazing cattle and keeping working lands working and keeping them in the hands of farming and ranching families, we're promoting clean water, clean air, biodiversity, you name it. We know that it has those impacts. And I think the cool part is our collaboration with Ducks Unlimited, which we call the Working Grasslands Conservation Initiative, is allowing us to work with cattle producers. It's all focused on working lands, obviously, and keeping those farming and ranching families with cows on those lands and keeping those lands intact and with grass. What's cool is we've been able to actually use their scientist team and actually start to measure and document some of those things. So we're looking at things like soil carbon. We're looking at nitrogen and phosphorus runoff, so essentially water quality. We're looking at things like soil erosion, biodiversity numbers inherently with Ducks Unlimited. And what's neat is we've been able to actually put together kind of this portfolio of data to now not just say, hey, trust us, cows are good for this environment. Cows need to be a part of this environment and this healthy ecosystem. Now it's actually allowing us to say for that consumer or that brand partner that says, well, how do you know that? Great question. Let me show you. Let me talk you through some of the projects that we're doing and that we're helping fund alongside of DU, and look at the actual impacts that we're having, the positive impacts that we're having. Now, I will say the challenging side for us, and I know the challenging side for producers and the frustrations, is how do we actually document and quantify some of that, whether I know there's so much buzz around carbon credits and scope 3 emissions. And that, I think from a producer standpoint, is the part that just gets extremely, extremely frustrating. Feels like the arrow might be pointed at us a little bit in terms of scope 3 emissions, whether it's a company trying to quantify. And, I will say even the meetings I've been in the last couple of months, we're really seeing a shift and I would say a push away from just scope 3 emissions and saying and calling on the science and calling for academia to help us figure out what some of those metrics are that take into consideration all these other things and positive impacts that cattle production has beyond just emissions. So I think that's a huge swing that we're starting to see of there's more benefit here than just greenhouse gas emissions. Not that we don't have to, some companies, they've got commitments, they've got obligations, they've got to think through that. But I think a positive for us as an industry is saying we need more science, we need more data to start to document and quantify some of this, but it's not just focused on carbon. So that's a positive for me, and I think plays nicely into what we're doing with Ducks Unlimited. And then same thing with our land stewardship course. It's just saying, hey, look, in the meantime, let's just keep getting better. We're doing a phenomenal job, but let's keep getting better. Let's keep better records so that, I don't know what the future holds. I wish I could say my job would be probably a lot easier if I had a crystal ball to say what was going to happen, whether it's in carbon markets or whatever it is, 5 years down the road or whatever. But I think in the meantime, we've just got to continually have that mindset of, let's keep getting better because it makes us more resilient. It makes me more profitable. And at the end of the day, that is a huge piece of sustainability on the farm and the ranch. Lots of shifts happening, lots of things happening where I still think cattle care and humane animal care is, a huge opportunity for us in the meantime while we start to kind of see some of these environment things play out. And our goal is just to, again, put more tools in the toolbox for producers in the meantime.
Absolutely. Going forth into the next year, what is kind of your guys' main focus at CAB as far as sustainability goes, as far as that consumer mindset goes? Are you guys seeing any shifts in the industry from one thing to another in this next year, or just kind of where your guys' focus is going to continue to be?
Yeah, great question. So I think for us, high quality beef production is still going to be huge focus number one, right? Making sure that we stay relevant as a brand to the cattle producing families that make up, whether it's the American Angus Association, the commercial producers, trying to stay relevant to them. So again, just trying to drive that demand with our brand partners for high quality beef is just first and foremost. But in the meantime, if we can continue to further our efforts with beef quality assurance, with our environment initiatives, and again, just continue, I truly think that this needs to be a part of that idea of how we're building demand. Yes, it needs to be focused on quality and consistent beef products. Absolutely. But if we can then bring this type of stuff and this message along with us and say, and did you know, and we are sustainable and you can feel good and you can share that story with your friends, your family, that this is a sustainable product. This is a sustainable protein. And I think that's what's most exciting to me, and what we're seeing as a brand just play out in real life today is, when we do on-farm or on-ranch education events with our brand partners, it's like, wow, I never knew that. I am so excited to go home, and they're posting on Facebook and they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to go home and tell my wife or my husband or my family or my kids been asking me questions about beef, and is it okay to eat beef because of the environment? All these things I think are so exciting that we're actually seeing our brand partners take that home, not just in their business world, but in their personal lives. And I just think as we start to think about continuing to grow demand, this is going to continue to be a part of it, and just getting producers the credit that they deserve for the phenomenal work that's been happening, like I said, for generations. So I'd say kind of a lot. We've got a lot of areas that we're focusing in, but just exciting times ahead. And we just continue to see beef demand be phenomenal, especially for certified Angus beef. So just exciting things ahead, Lauren.
Absolutely. Kristin, thank you so much for your time today. I so appreciate it. And to all of you listeners out there, if you want to hear more about any of the topics that we talked about, make sure you check out the show notes down below. We're going to have a bunch of links down there for you guys for CAB, Kristin's articles, all of the things like that so that you guys can check those out. And as always, make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review, share with a friend. We really appreciate it here at the team. And we will see you all tomorrow on another episode of the Cattle USA Daily Podcast. Have a good one, y'all.